Welcome back to Sleepy History Tales, where stories of the past are told in the silence of the night. Where are you watching tonight? From a small lit room or in the quiet darkness when everything around you has fallen asleep? If you look closely at an old photograph from 1851, you will see something wrong. A southern family, neatly dressed, stands before the camera. But behind them, in the dark of the frame, stands a woman. And in her eyes, there are flames. That flame is not an illusion. It is a message sent through war, through the dust of history, through the silence of those who were never allowed to speak. Tonight, follow the trail of that flame. With me, a silent protest hidden in the face of obedience. The Restoration Laboratory at the National Museum of African American History was unusually still that evening. Only the quiet hum of the ventilation filled the space steady, almost like breathing. Dr. Maya Collins adjusted the settings of her digital microscope, her eyes narrowing on a faded daguerreotype from the Harper collection, dated 1851. It showed what seemed at first glance to be an ordinary southern portrait. The Harper family, proud owners of a vast cotton plantation in Georgia, posed neatly on the veranda. Mr. and Mrs. Harper sat with solemn grace, their 3 daughters dressed in crisp white cotton. To one side stood the overseer, rigid and watchful. And behind them, almost swallowed by shadow, stood a young enslaved woman holding a fan. Her face was slightly blurred as if caught between moments. For years, curators had barely noticed her, just another unnamed domestic presence in a family portrait that history had chosen to remember for all the wrong reasons. Marcus Webb? Her colleague entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Almost done with the Harper collection, he asked. Almost, Maya murmured. But there's something about this one. On the screen, the enhanced image glowed softly. She pointed to the enslaved woman, magnifying the details. The record lists her as unnamed, Maya said. But look at her eyes. Marcus leaned closer. Where the Harper family's expressions were dull and distant, the product of long exposure, the woman's gaze was different. There was intensity there, something alive, something that seemed to reach out from across centuries. I don't think this blur is an accident, Maya whispered. I think someone wanted her to disappear. As she pushed the software to its limits, the image shifted, the woman's face clarifying, the shadows deepening. Then Maya froze. Inside the reflection of her eyes, something glimmered. Not light, not a trick of the lens, but flames. The next morning, she met with Dr. Eleanor Brooke, the museum's head curator and expert on early photography. Eleanor studied the enhanced image with a furrowed brow. Reflections like that shouldn't even be possible, she said quietly. Not with exposure times that long, not in 1851. And yet, Maya replied, it's there. She swiped to another section of the image, a close-up of the woman's neck. There, almost invisible before, hung a small pendant engraved with the initials L.J., Lucinda Jackson. Maya said softly, I found her name in the Harper plantation records. She was 22 when this was taken. Does anything else mention her? Eleanor asked. Barely. Just a line in an inventory. Maya sighed. But there's something else. The family letters mention a fire, a massive one that burned the plantation to the ground 3 months after this photo. Eleanor frowned. You think what we're seeing is a reflection of that fire? But the photograph predates it. I know, Maya whispered. But what if she knew? What if, somehow, she saw what was coming? The older woman was silent, caught between skepticism and unease. Finally, she said, "The collection was donated by Margaret Harper Davis, the last living descendant. She's in Atlanta, 91 years old." Then maybe Maya murmured, "She knows what the records won't tell us." Later that night, in the solitude of her office, Maya opened the image once more. Lucinda's eyes glowed faintly on the screen, reflections of fire still alive inside them. It was as if the young woman was trying to speak. As if through glass and time and silence, she was still waiting for someone to finally see her, someone to listen, and perhaps, tonight, that someone was you. The Harper estate in Atlanta's historic Buckhead district stood silent. Behind tall iron gates, a grand Greek revival mansion, wrapped in ivy and memory. As Dr. Maya Collins stepped onto the circular drive, she couldn't help but think about the wealth that had built this house, and about the people whose hands had paid for it, though their names were never carved into stone. People like Lucinda Jackson. Inside, sunlight filtered through the conservatory windows where Margaret Harper Davis waited. She was small and frail now, her silver hair swept back neatly, but her eyes, sharp and unblinking, carried the weight of generations. "I was intrigued by your call, Dr. Collins," she said. Her voice soft but steady as a caretaker poured tea. "The Harper collection has been at the museum for 40 years. Why such sudden interest in one particular photograph?" Maya chose her words carefully. "We've been digitizing the collection using new imaging techniques," she explained. "They reveal details the human eye could never see. I'm especially interested in an enslaved woman, Lucinda Jackson, who appears in an 1851 portrait of your family. For a fleeting second, something crossed Mrs. Davis's face, a tremor of recognition or fear. "Lucinda," she murmured. "My grandmother spoke of her a troublesome woman by all accounts." "Troublesome?" Maya asked gently. "That's how the stories went," the old woman replied. "Too educated for her own good. Someone had taught her to read, which at the time was a dangerous thing." Maya placed her tablet on the table and turned the screen toward her. "This is what we found," she said quietly. On the high-resolution image, Lucinda's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting what appeared to be fire. But this photograph was taken 3 months before the plantation fire ever occurred. Mrs. Davis's teacup trembled, clinking softly against its saucer. The caretaker stepped forward, but she waved her away. "Family history," she said after a long pause, "is more complicated than any museum catalog suggests." She reached for a small silver bell, its ring barely audible in the warm air. The caretaker returned, carrying a carved wooden box. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, worn, faded, but intact. "My grandmother's diary," Mrs. Davis whispered. "Charlotte Harper was 14 when that photograph was taken. She hid this her entire life." Maya opened the journal reverently. The old pages smelled of smoke and age. Mrs. Davis pointed to an entry dated April 7th, 1851. Maya began to read aloud. "Father had the photographer come today for a family portrait. Lucinda was made to stand with us, though she was punished only yesterday. Her eyes frighten me. She looks at us as though she can see something we cannot." Maya turned to the next entry, April 9th, 1851. "There was a fire in the night. Father says it started in the kitchen, but I heard him tell Mother it was deliberately set. Lucinda has disappeared. He says she will be made an example of when found. Mrs. Davis's voice lowered, nearly breaking. The first fire was small. It was meant as a distraction so Lucinda could escape. She was never captured. And the second fire, Maya asked softly. Mrs. Davis looked down at her trembling hands. That came 3 months later. It destroyed everything. The house, the barn, the records. The family always believed. Lucinda returned to finish what she started. Later, back at the museum, Maya and Marcus worked late into the night, the soft glow of lamplight pooling over Charlotte Harper's diary. "Listen to this entry," Maya said, turning a fragile page. July 29th, 1851. "Father has received a warning, a letter carried by a freed man from Savannah. It said only justice returns on the summer wind. He has doubled the overseers and locked away all lanterns at night. Mother pretends not to be afraid, but I see her watching the tree line at dusk. And the second fire happened on August 2nd, Marcus noted quietly. Exactly when the quarterly cotton shipment was ready. Dr. Eleanor Brooke joined them, her voice thoughtful but uneasy. This helps us understand the events, she said, but not the reflection in Lucinda's eyes. The photo was taken before either fire. Maya stared at the photograph again. The faint image of Lucinda's gaze glowing on the monitor. "I've been thinking about that," she whispered. "I have a theory." Her voice trailed off, and for a long moment the room fell silent except for the soft hum of the scanner, like a heartbeat echoing through time. The daguerreotype process was never simple. After exposure, the image had to be developed in a cloud of mercury vapor, a dangerous, delicate ritual, and then fixed in place. But what if Maya wondered the plate had been exposed twice, accidentally or deliberately? What if someone had meant for something else to appear there? Something hidden beneath the surface? Marcus frowned. That would mean someone wanted to superimpose flames into the portrait, he said. But who would do that? And why? Maya turned back to Charlotte Harper's diary, to a page dated April 15th, 1851. She read aloud. "Mr. Gillespie, the photographer, has been arrested. Father says he was part of the plot, that he helped Lucinda escape. They found abolitionist pamphlets in his boarding room," the photographer Eleanor whispered. "He must have altered the image, somehow used the process itself to hide a message. A message in plain sight. Or maybe," Maya said softly, "a warning." They looked again at the composition of the photograph. Lucinda stood directly behind Mr. Harper, her figure framed like a shadow, like conscience itself. Her eyes, now known to contain the reflection of fire, seemed fixed upon whoever dared to look back. Almost as if she was saying, "See what's coming." That night, the three of them worked in silence, cross-referencing family ledgers, newspapers, and census records. The Harper plantation fire of August 1851 had long been recorded as an accident, a tragedy of the Old South. But Charlotte's diary told a different story, one of resistance and deliberate reckoning. As Maya was gathering her notes to leave, Eleanor's voice echoed down the hall. "You need to see this." On her desk lay a brittle newspaper clipping, the Savannah Republican, dated August 5th, 1851. The headline read, "Destructive Fire at Harper Plantation. Similar incidents reported across 3 neighboring estates. Authorities suspect coordinated arson. Vigilance committees forming to apprehend suspected insurrectionists. Maya's pulse quickened. It wasn't just one plantation, she said quietly. It was coordinated, organized. Eleanor nodded slowly. And somehow Lucinda Jackson and a sympathetic photographer left evidence of it hidden in a photograph that everyone would see. But no one would truly notice until now. 2 days later, in the hushed reading room of the Georgia Historical Society, Maya searched through stacks of unprocessed archives. The air smelled of paper dust and iron ink. And then, there it was. The arrest record of Samuel Gillespie, photographer. He had denied helping Lucinda escape, denied any part in the fires. The charges were dropped for lack of evidence, but his career and his reputation had been destroyed. Still, something in the files caught Maya's attention. A collection of letters from an underground abolitionist network operating along the Georgia coast. One letter dated March 1851 spoke of a plan to free an enslaved woman described as exceptionally literate and determined. The signature at the bottom was simple G. Could it have been Gillespie? Had he used his art, his chemistry and light to leave a message no one could burn away? A warning that would sleep inside a single photograph for nearly 2 centuries. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Marcus's voice came through, breathless with excitement. Maya, you need to come back to Washington. Now, we found her. 24 hours later, Maya stood in the museum's research room staring at a register from the First African Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. Yellowed pages filled with careful handwriting. Marcus pointed. Here, September 1851. And there it was. Lucinda Jackson, age 22. Formerly enslaved by Harper family of Georgia. Assisted with lodging and employment as seamstress for Henderson family. Maya's breath caught. She made it. She whispered. She escaped. Marcus turned another page. There's more. She gave testimony about her escape and about the network that helped her. The church had recorded it as part of their abolitionist archive. Lucinda had described how she was secretly taught to read by Mrs. Harper's northern-born sister. How she'd used that forbidden knowledge to pass coded messages between neighboring plantations. How their coordinated fires had not been vengeance, but resistance. And then Maya read the line that made her shiver. Mr. Gillespie told me to look directly at him, to hold my gaze steady, even though it was forbidden. He said, "Let history see you." When the family wasn't looking, he showed me the glass plate. He pointed to my eyes and whispered that he had captured my fire, that someday someone would see. Maya's hands trembled as she closed the record. The room was silent, but for the soft hum of the climate controls. On the wall, the enlarged image of Lucinda's face stared out through time. Her eyes bright, her fire eternal. It wasn't only resistance she had carried within her. It was remembrance. And tonight, after 170 years, someone finally did see. The photographer had known exactly what he was doing. That impossible reflection, the flicker of fire in Lucinda's eyes, wasn't a mistake at all. It was an act of quiet rebellion. A message whispered across centuries waiting for someone to find it. What happened to her after Philadelphia? Maya asked softly. Marcus leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips. That's the part I love most, he said. She married a freedman named Henry Williams in 1853. They had 4 children, and I've traced her descendants all the way to today. He paused, watching Maya's eyes widen. Her great-great-great-granddaughter is a history professor at Howard University, Dr. Josephine Williams. Inside Dr. Williams' office, the air carried that quiet scent of old books and polished wood. Photographs lined the walls, fragments of lives once lived, faces long gone, but never forgotten. She listened rapt as Maya told her what they had found. "My family has always told stories," Josephine said slowly, "about an ancestor who escaped slavery. But there were no papers, no proof, only the name Lucinda." Maya opened her laptop, turning the screen toward her. "This," she whispered, "is your great-great-great-grandmother." Josephine's hand trembled as her fingers brushed the outline of Lucinda's face. "She looks like my aunt," she murmured. Together they studied the enhanced image, the faint shimmer of those impossible flames. Maya explained their theory that the photographer had altered the image deliberately to send a message he could never speak aloud. "It's extraordinary," Josephine said after a long silence. "A form of resistance through documentation. He couldn't challenge slavery openly, but he left proof of what was coming. And your ancestor," Maya added softly, "was right at the heart of that resistance. The fires that broke out across neighboring plantations, they hadn't been random. They were coordinated acts of sabotage, a strategy to weaken the very economy that had enslaved them." Josephine nodded. Family stories said Lucinda could read and write, rare for an enslaved woman. They said she used that gift to organize others, but we never knew how. She looked at the glowing photograph again. History always talks about dramatic escapes, about violence. But resistance took quieter forms too. Economic sabotage that was power. Burning the fields meant burning their profit. It meant striking where it hurt the most. Maya nodded. The Harper family never recovered. Their cotton shipments dropped, their land was sold. By 1860, they'd lost half of everything. Josephine's smile was faint, almost reverent. Then Lucinda's work was a success. As the two women compared records and stories, one from archives, the other from generations of whispered memory, Lucinda's life began to take shape. Not just as a survivor, but as a strategist, a leader, part of a vast and invisible network. And beside her, a silent ally, the photographer Gillespie, who had used his craft as his weapon. "We need to change the exhibition," Maya said suddenly. The Harper collection was always presented as a record of plantation life. But it's more than that. It's a hidden archive of resistance hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 centuries. Josephine nodded, her eyes glistening. Lucinda would like that. She always said, according to our stories, truth hides in the details. You just have to look close enough to see it. Soon the museum's conservation lab was alive with quiet purpose. Technicians leaned over magnified plates, scanning, enhancing, discovering. And one by one, the secrets began to surface. In another photograph, the cotton barn, they found faint scratches etched into the silver surface, a crude map of escape routes and safe houses. In the portrait of Mr. Harper, himself nearly invisible changes distorted his eyes, giving him an eerie, almost demonic expression, visible only under magnification. Gillespie, Marcus whispered, had been fighting a subtle war. He had documented the oppressors for history, while burying their undoing within the image itself. As the discoveries grew, a new exhibition began to take form. Hidden in plain sight visual resistance in plantation photography. An exhibition not about the masters, but about those who endured them, defied them, and left traces of their defiance in silver and light. And if you look closely, maybe just maybe, you can still see the reflection of the fire that once burned in Lucinda's eyes. The centerpiece of the exhibition would be the enhanced portrait of Lucinda Jackson. Her eyes, still haunting and impossibly alive, stared across time with the faint reflection of fire flickering within them. It was as though the image itself had been waiting patiently for generations to return its gaze. As preparations continued, Maya received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end trembled with age, but carried a quiet resolve. "This is Margaret Harper Davis," the woman said. "I've been thinking about our conversation. There are papers I never showed you, documents my grandmother kept separate from what we gave to the museum." 2 days later, Maya found herself seated in Mrs. Davis's dimly lit library. The air smelled of paper and dust and something faintly floral, the kind of room where time seems reluctant to move forward. Before her lay a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, the ink softened by age but still legible. They were correspondences between Charlotte Harper and her aunt in Boston, the same woman who in secret had taught Lucinda to read. "My grandmother was torn," Mrs. Davis said quietly. "She was raised in a slave-owning family, but her northern aunt's abolitionist views changed her. After the fires, after Lucinda escaped, Charlotte began questioning everything she'd been taught. The letters revealed the gradual unraveling of a young woman's conscience. In one dated 1853, Charlotte wrote, "I sometimes think of Lucinda and wonder if she found the freedom she sought. Father still rages about her betrayal, but I cannot help thinking the true betrayal was ours against her humanity." Maya looked up gently. "Why share these now, Mrs. Davis?" The elderly woman was silent for a long moment. "Family legacy is complicated, Dr. Collins," she said at last. "For generations, we told ourselves a story of gentle plantation life disrupted by outside forces. But that story was built on omissions, convenient ones. As the last Harper, I think it's time to tell the truth. All of it." She gestured toward the bundle of letters. "Take them. Include them in your exhibition. Let people see not only the resistance of the enslaved, but also the quiet fractures within those who benefited from the system, the cracks through which a little light sometimes escaped." As Maya packed the fragile papers with careful hands, Mrs. Davis asked softly, "I often wonder what became of Lucinda's descendants. Did they ever find peace?" "Would you like to meet one of them?" Maya replied. "Dr. Josephine Williams. Lucinda's great-great-great-granddaughter is working with us on the exhibition." For a moment, Mrs. Davis's composure broke. Her hands trembled slightly. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know if I have the right or the courage." Maya gave a faint smile. "History isn't just what happened," she said. "It's what we choose to do with it now." That same night in the museum's conservation lab, the lights were dimmed to a pale glow. Dr. Eleanor Brooke stood over the original daguerreotype of Lucinda Jackson, its silver surface gleaming under the lens of a spectral imaging system. "This technology can detect compounds invisible to the naked eye," she explained softly, her voice steady, reverent. "If Gillespie manipulated this image deliberately, There should be physical evidence on the plate itself. The team watched in silence as she moved with careful precision, scanning every inch of the surface, especially the area around Lucinda's eyes. The only sound was the faint hum of the machine and the occasional breath drawn in quiet anticipation. After nearly an hour, Elena leaned back, her eyes glinting with triumph. There she whispered, "Look at this." On the monitor, the scan revealed a false color image, faint traces of a compound clustered around the eye's potassium, ferrocyanide. Maya frowned slightly. That wasn't normally used in daguerreotype processing, was it? No, Elena said. But when applied carefully, it can create the illusion of light or fire during development. She looked up, her voice trembling with awe. It's proof. Gillespie didn't just capture an image, he altered it intentionally. This was no accident, no trick of light. It was a message, artistic and political sabotage. Meanwhile, far from the lab, Dr. Josephine Williams had been following another thread, the photographers. Tracing Samuel Gillespie's steps after his disgrace in Georgia, she discovered that he had quietly relocated to Boston, taking new commissions and working under another name. There, his life took a turn. He began to speak openly against slavery, aligning himself with abolitionist circles. And in an 1857 issue of a small Boston newspaper, Josephine found something remarkable, a tiny notice about an exhibition titled Unseen America, a collection of Gillespie's work said to reveal the true face of the South's peculiar institution. A man who had once been silenced had found his voice again. And the image of Lucinda, the one he had risked everything to alter, had survived as his testament. As the exhibition neared completion, it was no longer simply about photography or history. It had become something else entirely, a conversation across generations. Between the enslaved and the free. Between the silenced and the scholars. Between Lucinda and those who still search for her reflection in the firelight. And perhaps, if you look long enough, you might just see her too. The exhibition sparked debate across academic circles and drew passionate responses from the public. Some critics called it revisionist, others called it revolutionary. But among its fiercest defenders were historians and descendants of the enslaved, those who recognized in its heart not controversy, but truth. He continued his resistance through photography, Dr. Williams reported during one of their research meetings. Once in the North, he could speak more openly. But his activism began long before that, when it was dangerous, even fatal to act. Piece by piece, the story was becoming whole. Samuel Gillespie had been part of an underground network, a quiet alliance of free people. Abolitionists and enslaved men and women determined to fracture the system from within. He had used his skills as a photographer to leave behind coded acts of defiance, embedding messages and symbols inside the portraits of those who had enslaved others. Each photograph was both evidence and rebellion, but the most remarkable discovery came from an unexpected source. Margaret Harper Davis called Maya again. Her voice trembled, not from frailty this time, but from the weight of revelation. "I found something," she said, hidden in an old desk, a letter. It was dated 1855 and addressed to Charlotte Harper. The handwriting was elegant, but urgent. "I know you have questions about what happened," wrote Samuel Gillespie. "Know that she is safe and flourishing in her new life." The fire in her eyes that day was real. Not merely my manipulation, but the living flame of a spirit that refused to be extinguished. Remember what you saw, Charlotte. Remember and question what you have been taught. Charlotte had hidden that letter for the rest of her life. It was perhaps her silent acknowledgement that everything she had once believed had begun to unravel. 3 months later, the exhibition opened at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Its title, Hidden in Plain Sight, Visual Resistance in Plantation Photography. At its center stood the original daguerreotype of the Harper family, displayed beside its enhanced digital counterpart, the one that revealed what had always been there, but never seen the flames in Lucinda Jackson's eyes. Visitors could glide their fingers across a touchscreen to zoom into the smallest details: faint markings, hidden codes, chemical signatures, the ghostly fingerprints of rebellion. An entire section was dedicated to the technical analysis proving Gillespie's deliberate manipulation, while another explored the broader context photography as both a tool of control and an instrument of resistance. The exhibition expanded beyond the Harper portrait, tracing a lineage of visual defiance images taken in silence when open protest meant death. Portraits that were in truth secret testimonies. Opening night was luminous and tense. The auditorium overflowed with scholars, students, journalists, and descendants of both enslaved and enslavers. Maya spoke first. Her voice, calm and deliberate, filled the room. What we've uncovered challenges our understanding of resistance. We often think of rebellion as dramatic escapes, uprisings, battles. But this, she gestured to the glowing image projected behind her. This was something quieter, a conspiracy of documentation. A photographer and an enslaved woman creating evidence that would outlive them both. Dr. Williams followed her presence dignified and steady. My ancestor wasn't just seeking freedom for herself, she said. Lucinda was part of a coordinated network using her literacy, her intellect, and her courage to strike at the economic core of slavery. The fires weren't random. They were strategy. Resistance written in smoke. Then came Mrs. Davis. At 91, frail but unshaken, she rose slowly to the podium. The room fell silent. The Harper name still adorns buildings and streets in Georgia, she began. Our story has long been told as one of grace and civility. But it was a lie, a convenient, polished fiction. For generations we hid what made us comfortable and silenced what made us ashamed. She turned toward Dr. Williams. I can't undo what my ancestors did, but I can acknowledge the truth they tried to bury. Lucinda Jackson was not property. She was a woman of brilliance of fire, and she fought for her freedom in ways my family never wanted remembered. As she returned to her seat, Mrs. Davis reached out and took Dr. Williams's hand. Two women bound by bloodlines that once stood on opposite sides of history, now connected through the fragile silver of a daguerreotype and the defiant light in a young woman's eyes. Later that evening, visitors lingered before the enlarged portrait. Some wept silently. Others simply stared. The flames in Lucinda's gaze, captured 170 years earlier, seemed to shimmer faintly under the museum lights. She knew exactly what she was doing when she looked into that camera, Dr. Williams whispered beside Maya. She was testifying to her own resistance, creating evidence that couldn't be erased. And now Maya replied softly, her testimony is finally being heard. A year passed. In the quiet of the conservation lab, Maya stood once again beneath the same sterile light, examining a new acquisition, a small leather-bound journal discovered in the attic of a Philadelphia home being renovated. Its pages, fragile and brown at the edges, bore the handwriting of someone familiar. And as Maya read the first line, her hands began to tremble. My name is Lucinda Jackson. I write this so that when the fire comes again, someone will remember why we lit it. The journal had been authenticated, the worn leather cover, the faded ink, the unmistakable handwriting of Lucinda Jackson Williams. It was written between 1853 and 1875 during the years after her escape to freedom. Maya turned one of the fragile pages, her voice hushed as she read aloud to Dr. Williams, who now stood beside her, not just as a historian but as a friend. April 7th, 1856. She began softly. 5 years since the photograph. I dream sometimes of that moment standing behind them, looking into Mr. Gillespie's lens. I knew what we had planned. I knew what was coming. He told me to put my thoughts of fire into my eyes, to let my gaze speak what my voice could not. Today I received word that the photograph still exists in their house, that Charlotte looks at it often. I wonder if she sees what I was trying to tell her. Dr. Williams exhaled almost reverently. She knew, she whispered. She was consciously creating a record. That single line, those words on brittle paper, confirmed everything. The final missing piece in a story that had taken a century and a half to surface. Lucinda and Samuel Gillespie had not merely taken a portrait. They had crafted a message. A visual act of rebellion hidden in plain sight inside an image commissioned by the very people who enslaved her. As Maya turned the pages, Lucinda's life unfolded, not only her escape, but her rebirth. Her marriage, her children, her secret work for the Underground Railroad, her years as a teacher in Philadelphia's first school for black children. Her activism had not ended with her freedom. It had evolved into a lifelong mission to ensure others could claim their own. Over the next year, Maya and Dr. Williams worked tirelessly, transforming their research into a book titled The Fire in Her Eyes: Photography, Resistance and Memory in American Slavery. Its impact was immediate and profound. It shed light on an overlooked form of defiance, how enslaved people had used the very tools of oppression to bear witness, to document their humanity, to preserve their truth. Before her passing, Margaret Harper Davis, the last living descendant of the Harper family, had taken her own quiet step toward reconciliation. She established the Lucinda Jackson Truth and Reconciliation Fund, dedicated to uncovering hidden histories of resistance and educating future generations about the true legacy of slavery. Her family mansion in Atlanta, once a symbol of power and silence, was transformed into a research center and museum. The very room where Maya had once interviewed Mrs. Davis now displayed Lucinda's story, the tale of the coordinated plantation fires of secret literacy networks of courage, passed hand to hand beneath the weight of chains. And at the National Museum, the photograph of Lucinda Jackson had become one of the most visited exhibits in the country. School children gathered before it, guided by their teachers' voices. Look closely. What do you see in her eyes? Maya often spoke to visitors in that same quiet, steady tone. History isn't just what happened, she would say. It's what was recorded, what survived, what was seen, and what was finally understood. For too long, those plantation portraits had been treated as windows into the lives of the enslavers. The enslaved had been reduced to background anonymous figures without story or soul. But now, magnified through time and technology, their presence spoke volumes. And at the very heart of it all, Lucinda Jackson's eyes still burned, flames of rebellion, flames of memory, flames that refused to be extinguished. Each visitor who stood before that photograph became, in a sense, part of her audience, the one she and Gillespie had silently imagined in that small studio in 1851. A message had traveled nearly 170 years through light, shadow, and silence to reach us. It whispered still I was here. I resisted. I had agency. And now, at last, you see me. Would you linger if you stood before her photograph? Would you meet her eyes and see what she saw, or what she dared us to remember?